Good evening all, and welcome. Before the video begins, I'd like to give a huge thank you to all my amazing patrons who really do help keep the channel running. If you'd like your name in the end credits of every video, and a host of other perks, which you can see on screen, check out my Patreon. This isn't the only perk, by the way. These are all the perks for this category, and each category has its own different perks. So, if you fancy receiving some, be sure to check it out. In any case, it's time for us to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. When I was 15 or so, my mother reconnected with an old crush of hers from her junior high school days, Wayne. Soon after, they started dating. At the time, I thought it was pretty cool because I actually went to school with his son and was the same grade as I was. His name was Brandon, and he had two other kids as well, both younger, James and Allie. I didn't actually see Wayne very much at the beginning, as he and my mum would often go to hang out at his place. One night, I got a phone call from him sometime close to Christmas, asking what I would like for a gift, which I thought was especially strange, seeing that I barely even knew the guy, but I just assumed he was trying to get on my mum's good side, so whatever, moving on. He started coming around more, and I remember just something about him sent alarm bells off in my head like you wouldn't believe. He gave me the freaking heebie-jeebies, and Wayne moved in soon into their relationship. I chalked it up to my uneasy feelings about him and my mum moving way too fast into their relationship. Fast forward some time. My mum was working at a liquor store, and I was home alone with Wayne. I can't remember what this was over, but we got into some heated argument. I was young and full of teenage angst, so who knows? Next thing I know, he headbutts me, and I was so shocked. I didn't know how to deal with this. I told my mum, but nothing happened. Eventually, he managed to convince my mum to quit her job because he could financially support us, and she had back and knee issues, so she agreed. That's when things started to get really weird. I suddenly got a peeping Tom who would peer into my windows late at night in the summer. I would notice because I saw someone, or my neighbors would see someone, and at one point someone saw him taking pictures of the inside of my bedroom, and I'm not sure if I was home or not. The police were called, but of course they couldn't do anything if they couldn't actually catch the guy. I was terrified. To this day, I am so uneasy sleeping if my windows are low. Wayne took action and convinced us he would take care of the family. Such a hero. He convinced my mum to get a security system, which cost a fortune that had to be paid monthly. He convinced my mum to get a dog, Coda, she was the bomb, to keep us safe. Turns out, Wayne had hired people to look into my window. In the winter, I could see footprints all the time that led to my window. I didn't learn about that until much later, and I'm not sure how we even found it out. That's when he started to get physically abusive with my mum, me, and worst of all, poor little Coda. I used to just hold her and cry because I felt so bad for her. We felt totally trapped financially and felt scared of whoever this dude was that kept peering into my windows at night. We weren't scared. We were absolutely terrified. One night, Wayne didn't come home. My mum called him over and over again, and he wouldn't answer his phone. When he did arrive home in the wee hours of the morning, his clothes were ripped. He was dirty as hell and covered in blood. Wayne claimed he got mugged, and not long after this incident, homicide detectives show up at my house, and he pushes me away and tells me he will speak to them in private. Upon his return, he comes up with some story about how it had to do with a neighbor of ours that had gone missing. They were just doing door-to-door checks looking for any information, and that they won't be returning, and that there's no need to worry. A couple of weeks after this, a truck was found abandoned, and they found a body. There was a murder. The accused was a neighbor of mine. Honestly, it has never been proven, but there is no doubt in my mind that Wayne had something to do with it. And here's where we learn Wayne has a crack addiction. He was a huge dude. You'd never guess by looking at him that he had an addiction to drugs, hence why it took so long to figure out. It all came to a head one night. He and my mother started arguing. I heard banging coming from the bedroom, and I went running to save my mum. I found my mother huddled in a corner in their tiny-ass bathroom, and him on top of her beating her. I screamed and grabbed him, begging him to stop, and then he turned on me, grabbing me by the neck, pushing me up against the wall by my neck, and punched the wall directly beside my face. He let me go, and I went running. He had purchased an old-timey battle axe that happened to be sharpened, and it hung on our wall. He grabbed it and started chasing us with this axe. I thought we were going to die. Now, just to note, my mother tried calling the police when they first started arguing, but they didn't come. As he was chasing us with the axe, I had 911 on the phone with me. I was screaming, blubbering, and begging for them to come. In this whole mess, I don't know how he stopped or why, but he left. Once the cops got there, he was gone. He did get caught and charged, and we of course got summoned to testify in court. My poor mum was too scared to testify, so she refused. We still had to go to court though, and we saw him in the courthouse, and he gave my mum and I the most sinister grin I've ever seen. He was pleased with himself. He felt no remorse. So honestly, Wayne, I hope I am never so unfortunate that I'll ever have to see you again. In 3rd grade, I had this strange short teacher named Mrs. Todd. She was always super nice to me in class. She'd always call on me to do the funnest activities first, compliment me whenever I did something right, and was generally just very positive towards me. At the time, I thought she was perhaps my favorite person in the world, and I remember telling my mother just how much I loved Mrs. Todd. One day, I sat down at my desk and opened it to put something inside, when shockingly I saw that there was a Victoria's Secret magazine sitting in the pull-out drawer. The kid sitting next to me noticed how shocked I was. I thought I was going to get into trouble, and we started talking about how it might have got there, and almost immediately Mrs. Todd walks up and asks, "What have you got there?" I was seriously confused, and told her it was sitting in my desk when I got here this morning. She looks at me and tells me that the kid sitting next to me must have put it there, and she kept repeating the statement over and over again to him and I, until I finally admitted that I guess he could have done it. Maybe a few days after that, she approached me after class, telling me about this special field trip I could go on if I kept doing well in class. It would be a trip with just her and I to the Gulf of Mexico for the weekend. I remember being really excited about it at the time. However, suddenly she got replaced, and we get this new teacher that didn't like me anywhere near as much. I was so heartbroken at the time. It wasn't until many years later that I realized how messed up this situation really was, and it still scares me. These events transpired between last September and December. In September, I moved into student halls, which is university accommodation, which is 8 people with a room each in a shared living space with a kitchen. Everyone was great, and we had a great freshers week, and we didn't even notice that we had a nightmare living amongst us. Adam. He was the oldest of our flat. He was 23, and we were all between the ages of 18 and 19. There were 3 of us girls and 5 guys. Adam is a great-looking guy. He wore expensive, trendy designer clothes, was always very well groomed, and he was the life and soul of our flat parties, and was always the first one to the bar whenever we hit the clubs and stuff. So, 2 people who we shared accommodation with were very flirty with each other. Adam and one of my flatmates called Jennifer. They always had flirty banter, and always chose each other whenever we played Truth or Dare or one of those types of student drinking games. They were obviously into each other, but Jennifer said that one night she got this weird vibe from Adam when he was drunk, which another one of my flatmates, Callum, also picked up on. So one night in early October, we got together as we normally do on a Friday, and do a few drinking games and then hit the student nightclubs as most students do on a Friday. Adam does the normal thing, gets everyone their drink, and then as the night goes on, a few of us notice that Adam is buying shots for just himself and Jennifer, which isn't normally what he does, but whatever. It gets to 2 AM, and although we all have to split up a few times, as we do when we go to smoke outside and stuff, we notice that Adam and Jennifer aren't anywhere to be found, and we can't get in touch with either of them. But another one of my flatmates tells me to chill, and they've probably hit it off with each other because they've been flirting for a few weeks now. So the next morning I'm doing some laundry, and Jennifer comes out of Adam's room, looking like she's had the worst hangover ever. She claims that she remembers nothing of last night, and is slightly concerned that she woke up in Adam's room. Jennifer has everything until she tries to get into her room, and finds that she's lost her key card to her room. They search Adam's room high and low, but can't find it anywhere. We put it down to her losing it, and she is forced to buy a replacement one. This is where things get creepy. So Jennifer has one hell of a busy university schedule, and is out mostly all week. Over the week, she finds that many of her items of clothing have gone missing, mainly underwear, and gym clothing sports like bras and stuff. She's messy, and her room is very much a tip, so she kind of just put it down to being that. She is also a very heavy sleeper, but one night she wakes up and notices that her door is slightly ajar, which is weird, as it takes a key in order to get into someone's room when the door is locked. She does have sleep paralysis, and kind of puts it down to night terrors, which she does have occasionally. There's one night where she wakes up to a figure at the end of her bed. She also puts this down to sleep paralysis, and thinks nothing more of it. Jennifer continues to get strange vibes from Adam when we're drinking, and makes creepy passing comments about Jennifer's physical appearance. But Jennifer is creeped out, and when she reveals that she's going on a coffee date with a guy from her course, Adam doesn't say anything about this. But when she is on her date, Adam is coincidentally in the same coffee shop as her and her date, and she gets the feeling that he was watching her for the entirety of the date, which made her feel uncomfortable. But Jennifer asked why Adam was in the coffee shop, and he just replied, "Because I felt like it." At the time, I didn't see why Jennifer saw this as a big issue, but later on in the story, I see why she was concerned by it. Her night terrors persisted, but personal belongings were going missing, and one of these included a locket containing a picture of her and her deceased grandmother, which very much upset Jennifer, and she was now very suspicious. So basically, she was suspecting that someone had access to her room, and she does suspect that it's someone in our flat. And yes, the only one that she suspects is Adam. So Jennifer wants to put a camera in our hallway to see if anyone is accessing her room, specifically at night, and comes up with a ridiculous but pretty genius idea. One of our flatmates is a cyclist, and he has one of those helmets with a GoPro on it. So one night he leaves his bicycle and helmet in the long hallway of our flat, with the GoPro facing down the hall on record. Jennifer and Adam are in opposite rooms on the far end of the hall, so the GoPro is in a great position at the end. For the first 2 nights of doing this, there's nothing. This is because the battery ran out. But on the 3rd night, her suspicions were confirmed. Adam has her key, which Hall's office told her got deactivated when she went to get her new one. But that clearly wasn't the case, as he had been getting into her room and watching her while she slept. Now we're in December and getting close to the Christmas break, and Jennifer makes a report about Adam. But Adam has very rarely been seen lately, and after about a week of security knocking on his door, they finally open up his room and find it has been emptied, as if someone left in a rush. But some things are found that are disturbing. Jennifer's missing clothing items are found at the bottom of an empty wardrobe. Candid pictures of Jennifer, myself, and the other girl in our flat, Rachel. Empty whiskey bottles are littered around the room, as well as small drug-like bags found in his drawers, some still containing drugs. A flash drive was also found, and we were never informed what was on it. But we were told that Adam would be getting kicked out for this, and that the police would be contacting him. But since then we have never seen or heard from Adam again. But it's been a harrowing experience for our flat, mainly Jennifer, who is now very careful with who she trusts. So Adam, I hope you sort out whatever problems you're going through, but let's never meet again. When I was in high school, I had a huge crush on a guy a few years older than me. He was on the boys' basketball team, and I was on the girls' team. I would always try to get him to play basketball with me at our town's outdoor basketball court. He usually declined. One night, in the middle of winter, he asked if I wanted to come play one-on-one with him. I thought it was weird he wanted to play basketball in the middle of the night in winter, so I had my friend come with me. She got bored quickly, and he was being really flirty with me, so I agreed she could leave. He assured her he would drive me back to her house, which is where I was spending the night. And 30 minutes later, I'm freezing and ask him to take me back. We get into his car, and he tells me he has to warm the car up before we can leave. He's on his phone for about 10 minutes, and we're sitting there in silence. Out of nowhere, he starts telling me about one of his fetishes, and how he gets off on physically causing other people pain. He said that no one really knew the real him, and if they did, it would scare the living crap out of most people. I started becoming uncomfortable at this point, and asks if we can go. He pulls out the parking lot and begins driving the opposite direction of my friend's house. We lived in a small town, and he drives about 5 miles out of town and turns onto a gravel road. He tells me he's going to take me to meet someone he thinks would really like me. He then tells me I seem like the type of girl who would like being submissive to a bunch of men, and he wouldn't even have me beg for it. So I'm getting really freaked out at this point. I'm looking for my cell phone and remember I had left it at my friend's house to charge. I start asking him questions to distract him, and I'm finally able to get my hands on his phone when he stops at the shack in the middle of nowhere. He isn't aware that I have his phone at this point and tells me to get out the car because his friends are waiting inside and we don't want to make them mad. I dial 911 and tell him if he doesn't take me back to my friend, I'm calling the police right then. He looks shocked and then starts laughing hysterically. He tried to convince me it was all a big joke and he wanted to see how I would react. I held his phone with 911 ready to go the entire ride back to my friends. Once he pulled into the driveway, I got out of the car and he rolled down the window and said, "I would really appreciate it if you never tell anyone about this," and peeled away. I was 15 years old and should have called the cops, but I was young and dumb. This story happened to me a few years ago, when I was 19 years old. I'm female and used to live in the suburb, and in order to get to school I had to walk to the main boulevard to catch the bus, which is mostly a commercial area with shops, garages and gas stations and the like. One morning at around 9, I was almost at the bus stop when a guy comes out of nowhere and asks me something. I was listening to some music, so thinking he was asking for directions, I took off my earphones and asked him to repeat. He told me that he was a soap representative and asked me if he could have a look at my hands. Now, the guy did not look like a professional representative at all. My gut feeling was already sensing something was wrong. He was an overweight middle-aged man with dirty blonde hair, and he was wearing a blue t-shirt with stains. I was standing there puzzled by the question, and he just asked me again to see my hands. I raised them slowly, and he grabbed them and started to examine them. That's when I saw all the blisters on his hands. There were dozens of cuts with some yellow dried up body fluid. Up to now, I'd never seen anything like this. I quickly took my hands away and he told me that mine were dry and that I could really use some good soap. He then asked me if I wanted to go back to his car to have a look at the soap and maybe buy some. I refused, told him I wasn't interested and that I was in a hurry, and walked away. I rushed to school, just looking at my hands hoping I didn't catch some strange disease. I washed them at least 3 times and told my friends at school about the entire encounter, and we laughed it off as I always meet weird people and have curious stories to share. Fast forward 2 years later. I spent the night at a friend's house in another neighborhood. We drank all night, and I have a solid hangover. My friend teaches tennis to kids early in the morning, so he drops me off at a stop in front of the commercial center. It's Saturday at 7 a.m, and there's no one in sight, and I sit down and wait for the bus. Suddenly, someone arrives behind me and asks me if I would like to buy some soap. I recognize the guy from 2 years ago. I get up, quickly tell him that I recognize him, and he gets really uncomfortable. He tells me that it's really unlikely, and that it was probably a colleague. I tell him there's no mistake. I met him 2 years ago and specify where. He stares at me blankly, turns around and runs to his old rusty car. He sped off and drove away. My heart was pounding, and I could not believe that it happened again. Eventually the bus arrived, and I returned home. 10 years later, I still regret not running after him and looking at his number plate. I don't know what he would have done if I had gone with him. Maybe he just had a weird hand fetish, but he surely looked like an incredibly suspicious individual. And those hands were still blistered and haunt me to this day. Let's never meet again. I live in Trinidad, and am a girl. I was 15 when I was in 11th grade because I'd skipped a year in primary school. so I was a year younger than most of the other kids in the class. When I was in that grade, I was not exactly the most healthy or athletic person, but I genuinely enjoyed PE class, and I liked to run around in the gym and play games and such. So when I had to pick courses for semester 1 of grade 11, I made sure to pick PE just like I had done for grades 9 and 10. I was a little shocked when I got to the first day of PE and found out that our old PE teacher had gone back to Canada because his work term here was over. He had been with the school for 4 years, so it was understandable once someone told me that he hadn't gotten fired. We met our new PE teacher. He looked to be around 30-something, with light skin, blue eyes and blonde hair that was shaved on the sides and styled but short on top. A lot of the girls immediately liked him and said he was handsome, but I didn't see it because I wasn't really interested. This PE teacher liked to take us on walks and runs, so we would leave the school at lunchtime in a bus and come back as school was ending, since PE was last period. One time we went to a place that was known for its howler monkeys. It was a paved path through a forest, and it went up and around a hill. We started walking with the PE teacher in the back. When we reached as far as we could go in that time, we turned around and began going back down the trail. I was slow and not very fit, and I was in the back with my teacher the whole way down, and we were talking about what we knew about the howler monkeys and animals in general. I was an animal nerd growing up, so I had a bit of things to talk about. I was so happy to get to talk to an adult and have them take me seriously. I know it's kind of dumb, but I'm the oldest grandchild to a very traditional Chinese grandfather, and I'm a girl, not like the son he wanted. He pushed me to get good grades and never really wanted to talk to me, and my parents were always working, so I just wanted a grown-up to actually listen to what I had to say. On the bus ride back, I sat in front of the bus so that we could continue talking. I only got more attached to him when he let me talk his ear off about whatever I was obsessed with at the time, which was usually some comic book, TV show or movie. I think at the time it was either Transformers or Pokemon, but whatever it was, he let me actually talk about it. I didn't see anything wrong with that at the time, as I was always in the back of the group during our walks, and so was he, so figured we may as well talk. He liked to touch my hair sometimes, but I was used to that because my hair was so long that it went past my butt. After a few days of just walking and going places to do jogs, we played field hockey. We did it with 2 teams, and our teacher playing as just someone who could pick teams as he played. He was kind of like a third team on his own. He would help the losing team score points, and I don't think it was coincidence the losing team was mine, seeing how non-athletic I am. It was during this game that the other girls started to see something wrong with the way the teacher played. He would pat the girls on the butt with his hockey stick in order to get them to jump or get startled, leaving the ball open for him to steal. The girls later were complaining that what he was doing was gross and wrong, but I said that I didn't really see anything wrong with it. It took me time to realize that he really shouldn't have been doing that. The realization came when he started to use his hand to pinch the girls' butts next, instead of tapping them with the stick. Next thing I knew, the dude was fired. One of the girls must have told the principal or something. At the time, I was actually upset he wasn't there anymore, but looking back on that now, and knowing that I felt the way I did makes me feel disgusted. Grade 11 PE teacher? Let's never meet again. I recently switched from an Android phone to an iPhone, so I had to switch out the SIM card because the old one did not match with the new phone. I was told to go to my service provider's shop, so that an assistant could help me put in a new SIM card on my new phone and maybe transfer all my contacts. When I went in, I saw this guy sitting and waiting to be serviced. He started talking to me, and I treated him nicely until he was called to be serviced. He was done while I was still waiting in line, so instead of leaving, this guy actually came up to me and began talking to me again. At first it was light stuff, like asking me what was wrong with my phone, but then it quickly escalated. He asked me when I was free so that we could go get a pizza. I replied that I was too busy with exams at the moment, and instead of relenting, he asked me to list all the dates of my upcoming exams in order for us to go on a date another time. I said that I have a boyfriend and that I do not really want to meet up with him. However, he kept insisting that there would be nothing wrong with it, and we would just be eating and drinking wine. I told him I was uncomfortable with the idea of meeting a stranger so much older than me, alone, yet he said that it was only a date, and I quote, "We'll see what happens after." I was very creeped out at this point, because this man wasn't relenting at all, so I told him plainly to please leave me alone, and that I didn't want to talk to him. He grabbed my arm, and please note, this was in a store at 2 p.m. with at least 10 other people. The guard was a tiny woman who later told me she just assumed we were together. I made a scene, called over the guard and started yelling at this man, saying that he was harassing me, and she asked him to leave or the police would be called. And he promptly left. He had a confused look on his face, so I don't think he realized how creepy he had acted. Everyone in the store just stared at me because I really just made a scene yelling, but I wanted him gone. They told me to report him to the police, but I didn't know his name, and the employees couldn't tell me because of data protection. I really hope to not meet that creep again. My girlfriend and I were sleeping one night, when all of a sudden my girlfriend woke me up, saying she was hearing noises in our kitchen. I laid there listening for a few seconds, and then I started hearing the noises as well. It sounded like someone was rummaging through our cabinets. I told my girlfriend to stay in the bedroom and have a call to 911 ready, in case anything happened. She said that she was going to go ahead and call now, but I told her not to yet, and I really regret saying this. I came out to the kitchen and saw a man standing there looking through our cabinets. I asked him who he was and why he was in my house. He turned around quickly, and that's all I remember. Someone attacked me from behind. I felt something cold and sharp enter my back 4 times before I blacked out. I was stabbed multiple times in the back and my neck. I have a total of 14 stab wounds, 8 in my neck and shoulder area, and 13 are in my back. There was more than just one person in there with us. I woke up in the hospital a few weeks later. I was told everything that happened that night and answered several questions for the police. This is what happened. Our home was robbed. They took all our valuables and our cabinets, and the fridge was completely emptied out, and of course we were attacked. I was told the most devastating news I've ever heard. My girlfriend didn't make it. She managed to call 911 after hearing me scream, but she never got to talk. The operator heard the whole thing happen in that room. She was stabbed 28 times. She was unrecognizable after, and they even killed our 2 British bulldogs. I wish I told her to just go ahead and dial 911 there and then. I wish I was more aware of what was going on. The people who did this were never caught. I didn't see a face. The house was pitch black. and there were absolutely no leads. I still can't walk. I may be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life, and I had to move back in with my parents because I can't do anything on my own anymore. I try to remember more from that night, but I honestly can't, and I will never mentally recover from this. To the people who did this to us, I hope you do get caught. You ruined my life. You took away the love of my life. She was about to start a new job as a registered nurse. I will forever love her, and in turn hate the people who did this. Please, don't make the same mistake I did. If you hear something suspicious going on at any time, always make the call to 911 first. It could save your life. This happened when I was between 1st and 3rd grade, which is about 10 to 12 years ago. But this specific memory has permanently scarred me until now, and is probably the reason why I am not a very religious person. Anyway, here it goes. In the Philippines, the majority of our schools are Catholic. Some private schools require students to go to church every first Friday of the month. The school I went to back in elementary was one of those. Basically, every first Friday of the month, the students would gather in their respective classrooms before all of us would be led to the church. The church we went to was connected to our school, and each grade and section had their own areas in the church, so our advisors and teachers would be able to monitor us. The pews my classmates and I sat on were around 10 rows away from the altar, so it was pretty close to the front. The nuns and other church staff usually sat at the 1st to 3rd rows. I'm not sure if churches in other countries do this, but at the end of the ceremony, people clap in celebration after hearing a mass. I was sitting next to my close friend, and we decided to do something funny. We were around 8 at the time, so our decision-making skills weren't exactly the best. While the priest was saying the final blessing before ending the mass, my friend and I decided to clap. It was only one clap, but a loud one. The sound echoed in the church loud enough to catch the nuns' attention. Finally, the mass ended, and the students were led back to their classrooms, except our row. Enter the nun. She was old, maybe aged around 60 to 70, wearing a black habit, and it was very wrinkly. She marched towards our area fuming and began demanding to know who made the clap noise. I ended up admitting it was me, but my friend didn't. So I was the only one who got into trouble. The nun told my advisor to let me stay in the church. My teacher obliged, gathered the rest of the students and left me alone. At this point I was bawling. The nun went somewhere else. I can't remember where, but she did leave me alone for a few minutes. I was a small 8-year-old child who was left alone in a big church, aside from the janitor who was cleaning the floors. Chills were literally running up through my body. How would you feel if you were left alone with all these scary statues looking down at you? The atmosphere felt really creepy and eerie. The design and architecture of the church was Gothic, so it only fueled my fear further. When the janitor began to clear my area, I was begging him to let me out of the church, but he refused, stating he was only following orders. Eventually, the nun returns for me, grabs me harshly by the wrist, and tugs me out of the church and to their sleeping quarters. Quick note: in private schools in the Philippines, nuns and priests were residents and had sleeping quarters within campus. While the nun literally dragged me to their sleeping quarters, I grabbed onto a ledge near the gate, still screaming and thrashing around. We were outside this time, and the nannies and other guardians of the students were looking on, but none of them did anything to intervene. I spot my nanny from afar and could see her looking at me in concern, but she stayed in her spot. Once we were inside the nun's sleeping quarters, she throws me onto a bed and begins yelling at me, telling me what I did was wrong. That I have sinned for clapping while the priest was talking. She then threatened me that she'd keep me locked up in her room for a week. She even locked the door for emphasis. I was beyond scared at this point. She looked at me in the eye and asked me if I would do it again, shaking her finger at my face. I shook my head furiously, and I remember her reiterating that she'd keep me in her room, but only for 3 days this time. I told her that I would never do it again, and after what seemed like hours, she finally let me out. I was shaking when I returned to the classroom, but I don't really remember what else happened after this. We didn't really do anything to report the incident. I'm not sure if my nanny told my parents what happened, but if they did, they didn't come forward to file a complaint or anything. To this day, entering that church still gives me goosebumps. My family gets really mad at me when I don't go to church every Sunday, but I honestly don't care. Crazy nun, please, let's never meet again. This happened when I was about 13. Me and my friends, a group of boys, were all from relatively small villages, and we loved the few times a year that we all got to go into the nearest city together and look at the comic book store. One particular time, our group split up into 2 pairs, and I went with my friend to the bank. While he was inside, I sat on a bench outside and waited. While I was there, a thin, bald man approached me and sat down next to me. He spoke in a German accent and carried a briefcase and started asking me if I believed in God. I told him that I went to a Church of England primary school, but that I wasn't religious and didn't really know what I believed. He proceeded to open his briefcase and started showing me tons of leaflets and flyers and motivational religious images, trying to be polite. I spoke to him and listened. After a while, he told me that he had some leaflets in his car to show me, and that he was parked nearby. I told him that I wouldn't go with him, but I would wait on the bench if he really wanted to show me. He started getting very persistent, and I felt uncomfortable. Eventually, my friend came out of the bank, and the German guy said that we should both go with him to his car because he could show us some really interesting stuff. We kept saying no, and thankfully a couple saw that we were in a sticky situation and came over to ask if we were okay. This seemed to scare the guy off, and he backed away. When we started to walk back to meet our friends, we noticed he was following us. Luckily, the kind couple were keeping an eye on us and told us that they would make sure that we got back to safety. They put themselves between us and the German guy, and eventually, he stopped following them. To this day, I'm very grateful the couple intervened and stayed close. It's been nearly 20 years, and I hope to never meet him again. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. As always, a huge thank you to my amazing patrons for their continued support. It's your help that keeps the channel running, and I really tremendously appreciate it. If you are interested in becoming one of the amazing patrons, all that you need to do is check out the description of this video, and there is a link there. It would seriously mean the world to me, but of course is entirely optional. And I am really grateful that you just watched my videos to begin with. If you liked the video, don't forget to do all the good stuff. Bell icon, subscribe, like, comment, that always helps. If there's a story that you would like to share, feel free to send it to my email or drop it to my Reddit. Either are fine, but please be generous with your punctuation, paragraphing, and grammar. But for now, guys, it's time for me to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.